Boy, if that doesn't get you going in the morning, nothing will. So welcome everyone on this beautiful Sunday morning. And today we are doing a series on the book, See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love by Valarie Kaur. This book came highly recommended within the Unity movement, and it fits perfectly into the season for nonviolence, which began on January 30th and runs through April 4th. Most of us here can remember the civil rights movement of the 60s. And we witnessed change. Didn't come all at once, but 50 years later, we can agree that there has been progress. People of color have been discriminated against in many nations, not just ours. A couple of weeks ago, when we looked at the history of Unity, we saw that they also dealt with segregation early in the 20th century. And we acknowledge the strides that have been made and will continue to be made, not only in the Unity movement, but across the nation and beyond. You know, we're not doing bad for a country that's only 245 years old. Compared to other civilizations, we're considered to be in our infancy. But this country was built on the hopes and dreams of our forefathers, a country where liberty and freedom reigned. Reading this book, I was reminded of the turning point when we clearly saw our culture, the culture of hope, move to a culture of fear. And that was September 11th, 2001. That's almost 20 years ago. I also remember that rather than to pause to process our shock, grieve those we lost, and allow the world's outpouring of love and goodwill to be a balm for our wounds, our energies
It appears that Reverend Carmela froze. She did tell us.
and it became immediate.
Carmela?
Am I still frozen? Am I
You're
still
unfrozen.
frozen?
You were on energies and the energy froze.
Okay. I wonder if that's some kind of a sign. Well, our energies became immediately focused on war, and that very night, a war on terrorism was declared. And with that, it turned us into us versus them. Now, grieving, as the author explains, is a process that takes time and stillness and presence. She said it's impossible to grieve and prepare to kill at the same time. And while the consequence of unresolved grief inside a person is tragic, unresolved grief in a nation can be catastrophic, releasing an enormous amount of aggression. Over the past 19 years, the war on terror that began in Afghanistan has spanned nearly 2 decades, 4 presidencies, 76 countries, has cost more than $5.6 trillion and killed more than 1 million people. As a result, new norms were created, which fostered fear and hate, the criminalizations of Muslims, people of color, and immigrants. And this fear fueled the resurgence of the white nationalist movements. Now, over the next few weeks, guided by the personal experiences and spiritual insights of this author, Valarie Kaur, who's a Sikh activist, a filmmaker, and a civil rights lawyer, we will look at the call to show up to the labor of embracing, practicing, and being love. Not the emotion, the ethic. The ethic that has anchored the nonviolent movements of reformers through history. Now, grounded in principles of her Sikh faith, Kaur describes love as a form of sweet labor, fierce, bloody, imperfect, and life-giving, a choice we make over and over again. And if love is a sweet labor, she adds, It can be taught, modeled, and practiced, engaged by all of our emotions. Joy being the gift of love, grief being the price of love, anger protecting that which is love. And when we think we have reached our limit, wonder being the act that returns us to love. That's why I love the opening paragraph of her book, because she stands there in wonder. Revolutionary love, according to the author, is the choice to enter into wonder and labor for others, for our opponents, and for ourselves in order to transform the world around us. It's not a formal code or prescription, but an orientation to life that is personal and ethical and rooted in joy. It's a force for justice that can only be practiced in community. She says revolutions don't happen only in grand public moments, but in the small pockets of people coming together to inhabit a new way of being. We birth the beloved community by becoming the beloved community, which is a process and a journey I believe that everyone here can relate to. We birthed Unity Spiritual Center. We birthed the loving community that we are. Now, the author tells us the story of how she discovered the practices of revolutionary love in a tumultuous journey of awakening. Beginning in that moment when we wonder how to breathe through the world we're in and how to push to transform it. Being pregnant while she wrote the book, she uses a birthing metaphor that compares the darkness we experience in the womb and the revolutionary work of love to the necessary and long labor needed to birth a new nation. So from darkness, we move forward in love to create. And what we see created in love is very different than what's created in fear. She begins with a focus on learning to love others, that is, seeing no stranger, saying that when we wonder about people, grieve with them, and choose to fight with and for them, we can build a kind of solidarity the world needs. Wonder, grieve with, fight with and for. She emphasizes again that individual acts of love are not enough. We need to be part of movements that help us wonder, grieve, and fight together. Now, I thought I would be covering all the three today, but as often happens, it's just too much to talk about them all. So we're going to begin with wonder. Now, she speaks lovingly of her grandfather who left India to escape religious persecution and immigrated to California. She grew up on a 40-acre farm that her family had worked on for almost a century, absorbing her Sikh faith through his stories and lessons. Her favorite is the Sikh origin story of Guru Nanak, the first teacher of the Sikh tradition. It explains her faith and grounding principles. And here's her description. She says, 5 centuries ago, in a village in Punjab on the Indian subcontinent, there lived a young man named Nanak. He was deeply troubled by the violence between the Hindus and the Muslims around him. One day, he disappeared on the bank of a river for 3 days. People thought he had drowned, but Nanak emerged on the 3rd day with a vision of oneness, the oneness of humanity and of the world. This vision threw him into a state of ecstatic wonder, and he began singing songs of devotions called the Shabads, praising the divine within him and around him. In other words, he was love. He was the embodiment of love. And love made him see with new eyes. Everyone around him was a part of him that he did not yet know. I see no stranger, said Nanak. I see no enemy. He began to teach that all people could see the world in this way, explaining there is a voice inside each of us called Hamai, meaning the I that names itself as separate from you. It resides in the bowl that holds our individual conscious. But he said, separateness is an illusion. And when we quiet the chatter in our heads through music or meditation or recitation or song, the boundaries begin to disappear. The bowl breaks. He said, and for that moment, we taste the truth, sweet nectar. We are part of one another. Joy rushes in. Long after the moment passes, we can choose to remember the truth of our interconnectedness that belongs to one another. In other words, we can choose to see no stranger. Now, I'm sure in that statement, you recognize the teachings of unity, that we are all one, that there is no difference between ourselves and another, that separateness is an illusion. And when we go into the quiet, that quiet and stillness within, we touch and experience that oneness, that truth of being. Awe and wonder. Awe and wonder are foundational practices of Sikhism, often practiced by repeating Shabads, which is somewhat like our affirmations. Valarie describes her grandfather humming the Shabads day and night as he went about his work. Not so much praying as practicing a constant communion with all things. His way of remembering the truth, rehearsing his wonder. Now, in unity, we would call that practicing the presence. When we go within and we feel this divine oneness, this non-separation, this wonder of all things. Now, in his practice, he repeated the words, wondrous are the forms, wondrous are the colors, wondrous are the beings who wander around unclothed, wondrous is the wind, wondrous is the water, wondrous is the fire which works wonders. Beholding these wonders, I am wonderstruck. O Nanak, those who understand this are truly blessed. We are truly blessed when we practice the presence, when we go within, when we know and experience that divine oneness, that divine ecstasy. Now, he cultivated that same wonder in Valarie, calling her and her brother to look at the hose and the rainbow the water makes when sprayed into the sunlight. And her mother, when hearing thunder, their mother would cry out in joy and take them outside and dance in the rain, mouths open to catch the rain. What amazing appreciation of wonder, of everything. Valarie says, wonder is our birthright. If we are safe and nurtured enough to develop our capacity to wonder, we start to wonder about the people in our lives too. Their thoughts and experiences, their pain and joy, their wants and needs. Sensing that they are as vast and complex as we are. In other words, we see them as our equal. We are gaining information about how to love them. And wonder is the wellspring for love. Now, of course, it's easier to wonder about the people closer to us. It comes naturally. And it's more difficult to wonder about strangers, especially those that appear different. She goes on to say, but when we choose to wonder about people we don't know, when we imagine their lives and listen for their stories, we begin to expand the circle of those we see as part of us and prepare ourselves to love beyond what evolution requires. This is a call to love. And this call to love beyond our family is ancient, resonating down to us from indigenous leaders, spiritual teachers, and social reformers throughout history. Guru Nanak called us to see no stranger. Buddha told us to practice unending compassion. Abraham told us to open our tents to all. Jesus taught us and told us to love our neighbors. Muhammad to take in the orphan, the mystic Mirabai to love without limit. It is the ancient Sanskrit truth that we can look upon anyone and say, I am that. It is the African philosophy, Ubuntu, that says, I am because you are. It's the biblical burning bush saying, I am that I am. They all expand the circle of who counts as one of us, and therefore who is worthy of our care and our concern. And what has been an ancient spiritual truth is now increasingly verified by science, because science says we are all invisibly part of one another. Wonder is where love begins, but the failure of wonder is the beginning of violence. Once we stop wondering about others, we stop seeing them as part of ourselves, which deactivates our capacity for empathy and limits our ability to love. You know, our minds are primed to see the world as us and them. Whenever we look upon another face, our mind discerns in an instant whether or not they are one of us, part of our family, our community, our country, or one of them. This translates into behavior, because who we see as one of us determines who we let into our circle of care and concern, and who we are willing to wonder about rather than simply judge. We've been discovering that in order to counter this us versus them knee-jerk habit of mind, we have to be willing to wonder, not only about others, but about ourselves, as in how we came to perceive this way. What's the social, cultural, historical, and religious and family stories and experiences that have shaped our perspectives? We all have them. We need to look at them so that we can discern what's automatic, what's been drilled into us, and what we want to, and how we want to see. And we have to be willing to choose between the beliefs and stories we want to keep and the beliefs and stories we want to release. These are life-affirming versus life-defying beliefs, stories, and attitudes. The author says there are only those beliefs and stories that destroy the world that we want and those that create it. We get to decide which ones we hold in our heart. But even as we can choose to claim life-affirming, creative, healing, inclusive stories and affirmations, we must also be willing to labor, to stay awake, to catch our old life-denying patterns and fears as they rise up and consciously replace them gently with love, forgiveness, grace, and wonder. This is telling us that we need to be vigilant. We need to monitor our thoughts. We need to look at what's automatic and catch it before we live it. We can change it. Valarie reminds us that seeing no stranger is an act of will. When we encounter one another throughout our day, it is not our primal reflex that we're responsible for, but the succession of conscious thoughts that follows. So we're going to have that reflex, but it's up to us. What do we do with that? Studies have shown it can be as simple as wondering, what does this stranger like to eat for dinner? That's all it takes to dissipate our fear and open out our hearts. We move from a judgment to wonder. We can retrain our minds and hearts to wonder rather than judge, to open rather than close. Which do you choose? Do you choose today, right now, to be life affirming for all living things or life denying? The beauty is that we have a choice. We can choose at any moment. If we want to retain what Guru Nanak called the I, and we call the ego, or we want to live from the Christ and see oneness. Again, we get to choose. So with that, I'm going to invite you, as we move into meditation, to just close your eyes and be comfortable in your seat, to allow yourselves to just breathe in this life-affirming oxygen and to release any tensions or stresses that you feel in your body. Allow yourself to breathe in love and to breathe out fear. Allow yourself to breathe in comfort and breathe out concern. And above all, allow yourself to breathe in wonder. I am filled with wonder and amazement, and I behold the divine in every person, in every situation, and in every moment. I am filled with wonder and amazement. I know that there is the one of which we are all a part of, and I see no stranger, only part of myself blessed with the ability to love. I see no stranger, only a reflection of God expressed in the world in so many different forms. I see no stranger. I see the embodiment of love, the same as me. I see no differences. I see the divine expression of God, which is what I am. So I invite you now, as we go deeper and deeper into the silence, to bring to mind anything that may be stopping you or preventing you from knowing the wonder of yourself and of all others. And today, as I go about my day, I allow myself to be filled with awe and wonder, with wonder and amazement, as I see the divine in every person and all living things. And now I bring to mind anyone who may be in need of prayer. For those on our unity prayer list, those on silent unity, and all those who suffer in any way. We affirm that there is a power and a presence within them that will see them through any temporary condition they are experiencing in physical form. And we affirm the divinity in them will see them through it all. And now I invite you to bring your consciousness back into the room where you are, back into your body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I would just like to share something that Margaret posted in the chat box. It's a quote from Rumi. Drink from the presence of saints, not from those other jars. Every object, every being is a jar full of delight. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. So it's at this time in our service where we have the opportunity to give. So I invite you to take your gifts and hold them in your hand, or visualize whatever method you use, whether it's a check or a credit card or you use PayPal.